Here's a little process video of 3 paintings I created recently from start to finish. These are 3 birch panels. They measure 20 by 34 inches. I've primed them with gesso and I'm starting to make some first layers just to initiate the canvas. I like to write on the canvas with water-soluble materials like Derwent Inktense pencil crayons, a little bit of Neocolor 2 water-soluble crayon, some charcoal, in the colors that I'm going to be using for the painting itself, so they're complementary to the palette that I've already decided on. Sometimes I'll smudge those marks with the side of my hand. Sometimes I'll get my water spritzer out there and let the colors sort of flow and intermingle on the boards. The main point here is just to get something down so that I can respond to it when it's time to start applying paint. This is what the boards look like at the end of the first session. Lots of random marks. After I let those initial marks dry, I came back in with some paint. So I'm starting to move color around on the boards, taking my cues from the colors that are underneath with those dried water-soluble materials, and starting to lay in some darks and lights, covering as much of the board as I can and letting the colors mingle a little bit as they want to. Sometimes I'll add a little bit of water in here, blend things just a bit to create a bit of a blurry, blended background. Again, there's really no composition yet, no decisions being made about what's to come. Just trying to create a surface that I can respond to and starts to give me some ideas as to what it might like to be. Here are a few close-ups from the end of that session. You can see some of the bright colors and the drips that I let happen, and a little bit of the squiggles and scribbles that I put back on top with more water-soluble materials. So when I came back in to look at the boards the next day, I decided I really wasn't quite ready to move on with composition. So I repeated the process that you've already seen, which is going back in with more scribbling materials that are water soluble, adding a little bit of moisture to them to let them move around on the boards, and just trying to free my hand up and seeing what there might be to respond to once I come back to them a day or two later. And what I'm seeing at the end of this session are a few areas that I think are going to be heroes of these paintings. So that nice dark sap green hue in the center painting, the pink, the pop of crimson, I think that's going to play centrally in that painting, and the little bits of orangey yellow that you see at the edges. So this is the session where it all really starts to come together. You see, I'm painting the 3 panels side by side as if they were one continuous painting. There's a bit of a horizon line that's peeking in with the greens. I'm adding a little bit of color to the sky area, if it's going to be a sky, the blues and purples, and really starting to layer up the paint, making it a little thicker, adding some pops of desaturated alizarin crimson, adding some straight alizarin crimson right out of the tube to really accent those areas that I want to pop in the final painting. Every now and then I throw a spritz of water on. I like to keep areas of the painting smooth and blended while other areas are a little bit crisper and more clearly defined. This was about a 2-hour session, and it ended up looking like this. Apparently I missed a day of filming. The day that you don't see was the day that I added some white bits, and that's an upside down version. Sometimes I do that. Here are some close-ups of some of my favorite pieces, little crops of the paintings, showing the brush strokes, the thin and thick paint, the scratching through into wet paint, and just the variety of hues I was able to achieve with quite a limited palette. This is another session where a lot happened. You'll notice I have flipped the order of the paintings around. The one on the left is now upside down. I'm trying to break that horizon line in my head and just see where I need more contrast in values and shape, and how I might make some different marks on each of these 3 paintings so that they look similar, but they're designed to be siblings, but they can all stand on their own as well. What you can't see here is the amount of time I spent sitting back across the room and looking at them and trying to figure out what my next move might be. If only they all painted themselves this quickly. And just in case you're curious, the palette that I'm using is quite limited. Just alizarin crimson, sap green hue, nickel azo yellow, titanium white, and a tiny bit of Payne's gray. Here are some crops from the end of this session. I felt it was time to add a little bit of collage. Now I make my own collage papers on tissue, and I'm quite interested in adding a little bit of geometric shapes to these organic shapes on the paintings. So there's some cross-hatched collage bits that I've added to one of the paintings. Another one has some hexagons, and the third has some parallel lines. And those papers are all going to get partially covered up, as you can see here, in the last session of painting. Here's what the three pieces look like side by side once the collage has been added. I have several different types of marks that show up in most of my paintings, and after giving it a little bit of thought, I realized there is some meaning to those marks. You'll often see these vertical with a little bit of horizontal scratching. I think of those as unalomies, which are kind of the lifeline for us. That's another one there, what your life looks like, the path that you've taken. This is an open infinity sign. So some people think it looks like a fish, but it's not. And this is a heartbeat from an echocardiogram. So this is what the three paintings look like when it was time to reveal them to my collector. I took them over to her house. She and her family lived with them for about a week. So the last step of the project was to get feedback from my client. We had a little visit. We looked at the paintings in her home. She told me which of the two she wanted to purchase, and we had some discussion about color and shape size and some minor corrections that could be made to both of those so that they would really look at home in her space. And sometimes you can't make these decisions until you see the paintings, where they're going to be, in the light that they're going to be with the furniture that's around them. It's all a part of the process. I took the paintings home, made the corrections, and here's what we ended up with. If you'd like to see more, please visit my website, tamaragrand.com, or find me on Instagram at tamaragrandart.